telling me Democrats are about to reopen the government over a promise? Over a pinky promise? Not even a signed deal in ink and pen? Not even an auto pen? Can somebody fuck me on lewd? What do you mean? Pinky
If the rotating villain theory of the Democratic Party is true, and the Democrats have basically just confirmed that it is indeed true, then the implications are staggering. The rotating villains theory is this idea that the Democratic Party basically sabotages its own progress, that it doesn't really want to see some of the things that it advocates for get implemented. And the theory holds that congressional Democrats basically designate people to break with the party so that they just meet the number of people necessary to make sure that whatever it is that the base wants to happen doesn't happen. The Kyrsten Sinemas and Joe Manchins of Congress, they're not acting independently because they have like a strong moral stance on these things. They are carrying out the will of the party. If this is true, and Tim Kaine all but explicitly stated that it was, the Democrats are not just complicit or inept or stupid. They are actively orchestrating the continued subjugation of the working class. Resisting the Republicans and building a better world would actually not be that difficult. We just need a party that actually wants to do these things instead of sabotaging itself.
After 40 days of fighting for our subsidies, we got a pinky promise, what a gut punch. The Dems caved and then they fucked our families. And that's the way they all became the bitch-ass bunch. The bitch-ass bunch. The bitch-ass bunch. That's the way they became the bitch-ass bunch.
Curious what your take is on how everything unfolded.
Well, I guess the biggest framework that I can think of for this is the metaphor of a sizable portion of what passes as the sport of wrestling in the United States. There is a sizable part of professional wrestling in which the same employer employs both of the wrestlers, carefully choreographs every step of their combat, including who the winner is, which is planned in advance as well. And the whole thing is a kind of performative extravaganza aimed at generating the revenue from television and other coverage, attendance at the so-called fights. And everything stays pretty much the way it is, and everybody enjoys this combat, even though almost everyone knows that it's a total fakery and has nothing to do with a genuine contestation whatsoever. For me, Republicans and Democrats, in the main, are the two sides of one of these choreographed wrestling matches. They are paid now more than ever before by the same corporate sector of our economy. To use the words of the father of Kamala Harris, who referred to her as having been captured by her donors, he shouldn't have signaled her out. I'm sure that's a familial issue, not a political one, but the notion of being captured by your donors applies to an awful, awful lot of them. That's no doubt true. And I see that as a victory for capitalism. It allows the horror of what we see, a system that is producing levels of inequality that we thought were historically behind us in terms of centuries.
You have no idea the complexity of the corruption of your political system. I mean, you can take an example, say a lobby, a political lobby. The popular one, of course, is IPAC or APAC. They spend some $6 or $7 something million to unseat an incumbent Democrat, Cori Bush. She was the incumbent, and then there was a Democratic candidate that was challenging her, named Wesley Bell. Cori Bush made many statements against IPAC and many statements against Israel and against Zionism and so on. She took a very strong stance rhetorical stance anyway, against Israel and specifically against AIPAC, saying, for example, I'm going to burn your kingdom down, or I'm going to tear your kingdom down, AIPAC. AIPAC, I'm going to tear your kingdom down. This is something that she said. Okay, so AIPAC mobilized millions of dollars to support her rival. And then her rival, of course, got the nomination. Okay, but think it through. There's a whole ecosystem here. This is what's actually happening. What you're actually looking at is an entire ecosystem of political funding that is just a source of revenue. It's the same way that the military-industrial complex, for example, the same way that the military-industrial complex takes taxpayer dollars and moves it into the private sector. Something like AIPAC or any other lobby. AIPAC is just an example because it's highly ideological. Other lobbies are less ideological, like say the dairy lobby or something, or the farmers, a lobby for farmers or agriculture or something like this. But an ideologically based political lobby, like AIPAC, is a good example because they mobilize donations, they mobilize contributions, they mobilize their donor funding on an ideological basis. So when you have a Cori Bush saying, I'm going to tear down AIPAC's kingdom, and she's taking a pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli stance, that becomes very easy for AIPAC to mobilize donors, to mobilize contributors from American people, from Jewish people, and from Christian evangelicals and so forth. Their funding source is this: donations. So you're able to mobilize this huge amount of money. Okay, so now AIPAC has this huge amount of money, and then they're going to give it to Wesley Bell or to whatever politician you might be talking about. Well, what does that politician do with it? They hire political strategists, consultants. They hire PR firms. They hire polling experts, firms that do polling, agencies that do polling. And of course, they hire media companies to produce advertisements. Okay, so this is funneling private citizens' money into those companies. That's all it is. This is those companies now basically being run. They're for-profit companies, but they're basically being funded through donations to AIPAC. And then there's connections between a firm like Berlin Rosen. There's a connection between them and the United Democracy Project, which is AIPAC affiliate. So AIPAC gives the money to UDP, and then UDP gives the money to the campaign. The campaign gives the money to, say, for example, Berlin Rosen, to hire them to do political strategy. Now, I don't know if this is the case with the Wesley Bell campaign or not, but this is generally how it works. Berlin Rosen is one of the most prominent and influential and successful political strategy organizations or consultancies in the United States. So very likely, and they're always on being called upon by the Democrats. So very likely they were recruited to do this work. So now there's a connection between UDP and Berlin Rosen because the co-founder of Berlin Rosen is on the board of directors, I believe, of UDP. So that means there's a connection between AIPAC and Berlin Rosen, political strategists. So AIPAC is taking money from their donors, and then they're just giving it to these companies by means of a candidate, by means of a political campaign. So there's a whole ecosystem. It's like a cottage industry connected with a political lobby. You understand? So the political lobby uses the ideology to mobilize donations, and then those donations just go for capitalist purposes. That's where the money goes. It goes from the pockets of the donors into the bank accounts of private companies that are hired by a campaign. It's an incredibly corrupt system. And the public is sidelined because also, once the politician is elected, the one who is advising the politician, advise in quotes, is those same private strategists, those private company strategists, those private consultants. They're the advisors. Politicians have paid staff that's paid by the taxpayers. They have their own staff. They have their own administration. They have their own cabinet. But they're relying on private consultants for what their policies are going to be and how they're going to respond to this or that situation. So these people in the private sector are controlling the policies of the politicians who they help to elect. This is what people need to understand about what is meant when you talk about money in politics. The money in politics isn't in politics so much as it is in business. It's taking the individual donations of voters, of Democrats, of Republicans, and then of ideologically motivated people, like someone who's pro-choice or anti-abortion or pro-death penalty, anti-death penalty. They want more people on the Supreme Court or what have you. All of these issues, the only reason they exist and the only reason that they put those issues in your mind is to get the money out of your pocket. That's all it is. They try to find anything that will trigger you. They try to push your buttons, the things that you care about or that they think you care about, and whatever resonates the most, then they know that will motivate you to give political donations to this candidate or that candidate. And a political donation to this candidate or that candidate, all that is money that's going into this other ecosystem of the private sector, of these political consultants, media companies, polling companies, obviously lawyers, obviously advertising and PR agencies and so forth. All you're doing is funding an ecosystem. And it's connected again with other sections of the private sector because all of those companies also do work and their clients include a variety of industries, a variety of corporations and companies. The one that I just mentioned that works with the Democrats, well, one of their clients is Google. They have major corporate clients. So these are all connected. All of these private entities, these private business entities are connected with each other. The advertising industry, the PR industry, the consultancies, all of them are connected and they all work for the private sector, and then they incorporate into their work and how they serve their clients. One of the things that they incorporate into how they serve their clients is by electing this or that politician.
You know, it's the deception that bothers me. The deception is cruel. I mean, from the moment they wrote the words, "We the people," leaders in the United States have relentlessly sought ways to subvert democracy in America. They've sought ways for outwitting their own founding documents for over 200 years. Even in the Constitution itself, it provides for elections, and then it imposes mechanisms that render those elections pointless. The separation of powers, the checks and balance system. Well, whose power is being checked? Elected power. The power of the elected representatives of the electorate. Nobody checks the Supreme Court, for example. That's really the supreme branch of the U.S. government, the Supreme Court. And those are lifetime positions. The framers of the Constitution seem to be primarily dedicated to creating a system that would ensure maximum inefficiency. Because the founding fathers were, as we know, deeply suspicious of government itself. I mean, think about it. No taxation without representation. That was the slogan. Well, that could go a different way. No representation, no taxation. If you asked most Americans today, which would you rather have? Your whole paycheck or your senator? What do you think they would choose? Which do you think they would feel is more useful to them? Their full salary or their congressperson? Their congressperson who is completely subservient to his or her campaign donors and to whatever corporate sector they want to enter once they leave office. Their congressperson who listens and obeys lobbyists more than they'll ever listen to their constituents. I mean, the entire political platform for any candidate is calculatedly drafted to serve the interests of whatever business sector they're going to target for campaign funding. That's why they put the policies that they do, or the proposals that they do. Elections in the U.S. are like talent shows. Just like those shows where the audience votes for whoever sings the best, so that then they'll win a recording contract or something like that with a major producer. It's the same thing. You elect a politician, whoever sings the best, so that then that politician can win lucrative deals with business. It's got nothing to do with your interests. You pay a higher percentage of taxes, in fact, than corporations, but corporations have a higher degree of representation than you do. I mean, according to what's called the Citizens United decision, that was in 2010, corporations have personhood status under the law, except it's a super personhood status because they're larger than life. Corporations have the right to free speech under this ruling, and that speech includes political campaign funding. So literally money talks. The rule says that it would be an unfair restriction on corporations' right to freedom of speech to limit how much money they can spend to get whatever they want from politicians. Freedom and democracy. You see? They come up with every possible way to shut you out. And who do you suppose made that Citizens United decision? Well, it was the Supreme Court. I mean, look at education, at higher education in the United States. A functioning democracy requires an informed and educated public. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. He said that a well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. So what can you deduce might be the objective when you make education prohibitively expensive? When you set up a system to restrict access to education for the citizenry and make it only accessible for the rich. Well, that's a recipe for tyranny, according to one of your own founding fathers, but that's what you're doing. I mean, my mother was still paying off her student loans when she was in her 70s. And you keep finding new ways to discourage people from going to university. It's not enough that you expect an 18 or 20-year-old to come up with more money than it takes to buy a house just to be able to get a degree. That's not enough. So you have to start creating useless degrees, useless so-called disciplines, degrees in electronic feminist activism, degrees in navel gazing, so that you can then start to say, well, university is really pointless. As if there aren't still degrees available in the sciences, in law, in business, in history, in the fundamental disciplines. You make people think that university is all just a joke. You set up all of these absurd degree programs to make university look like it's pointless. So why bother? Everyone thinks, just why bother? Why should I go into debt just to get a useless degree? Meanwhile, the children of the elite are still going to university because they're the ones who are on track to be the managers of society. They're on track to rule you. I mean, why do you think that they didn't allow slaves to learn to read in the South? The same reason that they don't want you to be educated. Because you're serfs. The U.S. is looking to revive domestic manufacturing. They want to bring back offshore factory jobs back to the U.S. They want you to be on an assembly line. They don't want you to have a lot of big ambitions about your future. They don't want you to have the intellectual tools for self-sufficiency or critical thought so that you can actually see and recognize and understand what your society really is. Everything about the society is calculated to marginalize the population. And one of the main instruments that they use to marginalize the population is the constant repetition about how free and how democratic it is. It's quite telling that for any other country in the world, if you want to learn about it, if you want to understand it, if you want to really know that society, you have to go there. You have to live there. You have to mix with the people. You have to experience it. But with America, it's different. People outside of the U.S. understand it and know it far better than Americans do. And if Americans want to actually learn about and understand their country, they would have to leave the U.S. They would have to go outside the U.S. to educate themselves about it. You would have to go outside of the U.S. to learn what America really is. Thomas Jefferson's defense against tyranny has been and is being systematically repressed in the United States. So you tell me what kind of a system that means it is. For security reasons, the government gets to watch you online. They get to know everything that you're doing. But for the same security reasons, you're not allowed to watch them online. You're not allowed to know what they're doing. All the CCTV cameras are pointed at you. All the surveillance systems are pointed at you. Meanwhile, your so-called public servants have more privacy than you do? What kind of a servant has more privacy and more rights than their supervisor? I mean, isn't that supposed to be the relationship? Politicians and bureaucrats, state workers, they're public servants, right? But can you monitor what Senator so-and-so is doing on the internet? Can you listen in when Congressman such and such meets with his donors, meets with his financiers, his funders, with businessmen? I mean, what's on Joe Biden's browser history? He can find out what's on yours. Why can't you know what's on his? And more importantly, the real power players are completely off the radar. The CEOs, the shareholders, the oligarchs, the people who have by far the most power over the conditions of everyday life for people in America and around the world, the people who have the most power over government policy, they're not even acknowledged as having that power. The real controllers of the society are completely obscured and unscrutinized and unaccountable, except to each other. That's the system. It just self-identifies as democratic.